Hey everybody, I don't know about you, but as you've watched out over the world, the war in Russia and Ukraine is not just isolated to Eastern Europe. It's spread all over the world, and you can see it in market instabilities. You can see it here. People who do not think that that war is affecting you, all you got to do is look at gas prices. You look at your food prices. You see the global change that has happened. But you know something that's also affected investments as well. And I've said all along, Legacy Precious Metals is your navigator. They're the ones that see you through to get to the next level. The good news about this is even with market volatility, market instability, you've got options. And gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold. And gold presents a hedge against this inflation and that protects you against the weakening dollar, which we are seeing. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust to deal with gold and silver and the other precious metals. You need this investment. You need this as part of your portfolio to keep you buffered from what we're seeing in the world. War and volatility in the market. This is where you need to be. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive about this. Get on board with it. Call them at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. legacypminvestments.com, your navigator in a volatile world of investments.
You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it? The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority saying, be damned with anything else, we're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Collins. Welcome back to the Doug Collins Podcast. You know, I got a lot of feedback from many of you talking about how leadership matters. And some of our podcasts that we've done on speeches and events from some of our former presidents, some of our leaders. And I wanted to spend some time on this leadership issue because I believe that leadership matters. I believe it's one of the things that we're lacking. I mean, we've talked about it with the Biden administration's lack of leadership and how they blame others and don't follow some basic, leadership principles. But I also want to highlight some mavericks because I believe sometimes that crossing over and understanding that the country is in a position in which we need leaders to step up is so vitally important. And I want to start we're going to do this occasionally. I'm going to take a book, and there was a book that came out, and it was from a speech that I went back recently and was reminded of someone who was the governor of the state of Georgia. He was also a senator from the state of Georgia. He was one of the longest serving lieutenant governors in the state of Georgia, made a real impact on the national landscape in the early 2000s and the 1990s here in the state of Georgia. He was a Democrat. But yet he was a conservative, especially on social issues. As he got older, was even more conservative. And he actually broke with the Democratic Party. He never actually, he said, left it. He said, the Democratic Party left me. I did not leave the Democratic Party. The gentleman is Zell Miller, former United States Senator Zell Miller, former Governor Zell Miller. There was a lot that I gained from Zell Miller. Zell Miller grew up about 50 miles north of me, in a little place called Young Harris, Georgia, in between Blairsville and Hiawassee, up in the mountains. He was raised by a single mom that built literally the house that he lived in up until the time he died. And it was a flat stone house that was built as a stone house. You can still go by Young Harris today. It's right on the main road going through Young Harris. His mom was one who was just, from everything that I can gather, I never had the opportunity to meet her, but she was just an amazing woman, artist, just long before, as Zell Miller liked to say, long before there were single moms, the terminology, my mom was a single mom with him and his sister. Zell Miller had an interesting history here in the state of Georgia. He was there was several times he was known. He would change positions. He evolved over time. There was a time he was tagged by one of his opponents as Zigzag Zell because the changes sometimes in position. But what you look at, if you see his life, what you begin to find is that as he matured, as he learned, as he I guess, grew is a way to put it, and also was an amazing person at reading a landscape and reading a room. He became a person later in life, especially, that wielded a great deal of power. I had the privilege of getting to know him because I represented him in the United States Congress. He was a constituent of mine. He actually helped me in my campaign, and I appreciate Zell Miller. Now, we disagreed on issues. Now, toward the end of his life, we probably agreed on most issues because he had a conversion of his thinking about abortion. He became very pro-life. He was always pro-Second Amendment. He was pro-fiscal conservatism. He believed in a strong military. He believed in a strong, conservative way of thought. He did that even when he was in Georgia. So it's as it evolves here, there's this idea of today's Democratic Party being, which it is this basically been captured by the far left. There are people like Zell Miller who forewarned of this movement, who said, look, you're moving away from the very core and foundations of who the Democratic Party should be, or who we should at least be for our people. Now, Zell Miller, for many, came to light in a 2004 speech that he gave at the Republican National Convention. He was one of the first. It's become a little bit more, I guess, not say popular, but more common now, in which Republicans, a prominent Republican or a prominent Democrat, speak at the other one's convention for president. And we've seen that happen. But Zell was one of the more prominent first ones that did it. I want to spend just a few minutes on this speech because it is what brought Zell Miller to prominence in national circles, as he was a United States Senator at the time. He was a two-term governor. And it was the breaking from John Kerry and where he saw the party going that made this speech, one, memorable, but it also made a difference, I believe, in that election, the re-election of George W. Bush. In that speech, and I have the speech here with me, and I just wanted to read just a few quotes from it. He made an interesting point. He said that in President Roosevelt, and this is from the speech, he said, in that speech this summer in 1940, this was right before World War II, he said, all Americans, he said, told America, all private plans, all private lives have been in a sense repealed by the overriding public danger. He was talking about the danger of Adolf Hitler, and Europe, and the things that were going on there. And Roosevelt, if you remember, was bringing the American attention to this, saying that, I think Roosevelt understood that eventually we were going to be drawn into this war with the World War II. He was trying to prepare America. Now, also in 1940, Wendell Willkie was the Republican nominee. And there's no better example of someone repealing their private plans, that this is what Zell Miller talked about, than this good man. Who's he talking about? He's talking about Wendell Willkie, the Republican nominee. Now, we know that Wendell lost this race, but listen to what he said. He gave Roosevelt the critical support he needed for a peacetime draft, an unpopular idea at the time. He made it clear that he would rather lose the election than make national security a partisan campaign issue. That's an interesting statement. He goes on to talk about it. He says, shortly before Wendell Willkie died, he told a friend that if he could write his own epitaph, he had to choose between here lies a president or here lies one who contributed to saving freedom. He would prefer the latter. Miller goes on to say, where are such statesmen today? Where is the bipartisanship of this country when we need it the most? And then he begins why he chose to represent and promote George W. Bush is because, as he said, there was a manic obsession with getting rid of the president, which was George Bush, attacking the commander-in-chief. Now, one of the reasons you may ask, well, why would someone who has been steeped in Democratic politics, I mean, this is a man who had Paul Begala and James Carville as his campaign managers when he ran in Georgia as governor. And, so this is a Democrat, okay? And those two, again, very liberal Democrats in very ways, but he was an anomaly in the sense of a conservative Southern Democrat in many areas, but he also was one that pushed the line. And when you see him stand up there in 2004 later in life, and he actually is upset with the Democratic Party for not basically what he believed leading and not being loyal to the country. Now, whatever opinions at the time, the design that was going on over the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, what Zell Miller said was, he said, while we're in this time, I'm going to stand with the president instead of those who simply want to tear him down. He went on then to take down John Kerry point by point by point. He said, I can tell more in 20 years of watching a man vote than what he says. And he broke down John Kerry's vote against every weapon system, everything that had to do with the military. And going back to John Kerry's criticism of our troops coming out of Vietnam in 1970 when he testified on Capitol Hill, in the peace movement that was coming on now. Now, look, John Kerry has every right to his every belief. He had a right to run for president, and he can be as liberal as he wanted to be. What upset Zell Miller, and one of the things that I wanted to talk about Zell this morning was not just that speech, but although he did that, it comes from who Zell Miller is. And I think this is important. As we've talked about leadership on this podcast before, and it's being who you are, and it's taking that ownership. Zell Miller took that to a different extreme. He took ownership of what he did. He was forceful and had a work ethic that was unmatched many times in politics to get things done. And Zell Miller, at the end of the day, will be remembered here in Georgia for the Hope Scholarship, which gave well over $1 billion to allow students to go to college. He's will be remembered for the pre-K program, a universal pre-K program that was one of the first of its kind back in the 1990s. Again, this money from the lottery, he was a man who brought the lottery to Georgia, which most people never thought would happen, said it would go for education, made it true, and it is still working today. So why would Zell Miller, a Democrat who had success as a Democrat governor, two-term governor in Georgia, had a success as a United States Senator appointed by the next governor, Roy Barnes, to fill the seat of Paul Coverdale, why would he stand at this 2004 convention and go against his own party, go against some of the things? And it comes down to basically his upbringing, for lack of a better term, and also his experience in the United States Marine Corps. Zell Miller was a Marine till he died, and the Marine Corps made the lasting impression upon him that he wrote down in a little book called Corp Values. Corp Values, everything you need to know I learned in the Marines. And I was going back through my bookshelf the other day, and I was reading through this, and I was looking at political courage, and I was seeing Joe Biden and the Biden administration seemingly blaming everybody else in the world for all of their problems and everything going on, that this book just stuck out. Now, if you want to go find it, it was written a number of years ago, but you can find it. I'm sure that you could look it up on wherever you get your books. And but it goes back to core values of his life and how he came to know it. The first part of this book really sort of sets the tone. And I want you to hear this. This is in the prologue of Core Values by Zell Miller. He said, drunk, dirty, disheveled, and dejected, I sat cross-legged on the floor of the Gilmer County Jail in the Appalachian town of Ellijay, Georgia. It was a hot Saturday night in August of 1953. Drunk out of my skull from rock gut moonshine liquor, I had swiped a car and run headlong into a ditch. Within minutes, I was handcuffed, thrown into the back of a sheriff's car, and carted off to where I belonged. Behind the bars with me were 4 others, all of us in the same dark cell. 3 old grizzled mountaineers in bib overalls, and a man in dandy and seersucker pants, and what had been once a white starch shirt, and me. All were older, and all were just as drunk as I was. I was 21 years old. One thing was clear in my woozy head. I was in a bad, bad situation, and it was no one's fault but my own. You know, as he starts this book, he begins with that time in his life in which he talks about being growing up. He talks about being in that jail and how that was the wake-up call for him, that he had to do something with his life. After that, he goes and joins Marine Corps. He talks about going on to Parris Island. And, you know, the aspects of things that he learned in the Corps began to shape and form this man that we see many, many years later, almost 60 years later, in the 2004 50 years plus later in the 2004 Republican National Convention. If you wanted to know this, go back through. I would encourage you to read this book. I'm not going to read the book for you today, but I am going to take some emphasis because he lists out 12 core values. He says he kept these in his pocket. He reminded himself that these were values that he learned and he wanted to continue to share. And I'm gonna read the 12 values. The 12 values were neatness, punctuality, brotherhood, persistence, pride, respect, shame, responsibility, achievement, courage, discipline, and loyalty. Now, I want to take a few of these and just break them down, because I believe in a time today in which we have politicians, we have business people, we have just general public believing that values are interchangeable, that values can change. I believe that there has to be a core set of values. As the book title, it says core values, things in your life that make the difference. Now, later on in this book, he discusses, and some of you may be saying, well, I have core values, but what if something changes? And he discusses that. And he discusses a time with a former president who many people, history is not judged very well so far, and that was Jimmy Carter. When Jimmy Carter and Zell Miller knew each other, had known each other for a long time, and when Zell Miller had supported Jimmy Carter for president, when Jimmy Carter went to the White House, Jimmy Carter pardoned those who had avoided the draft dodgers who had went to Canada. And he brings this up because the issues of values of the country and loyalty and the country were at odds. And at the end, Zell Miller says, he said, I would have probably chose differently. He says, but when these two values are confronted, you have to choose, the one that actually maybe helps the most people. He said, at the end of the day, he said, maybe the position by Carter was one that helped our country heal. He said, I don't know about that. He said, but at least, he said, I do know that it was operating off of a values assumption. I tell you that story to say that you're going to have times in which you have values within yourself, loyalty, maybe, it may be responsibility, and others that are going to conflict. And the question is what do you do to maintain your integrity, but find a way to answer the questions of life truthfully? So in looking at this, let's just talk about a few. Some of them are fun. Some of them are, I think as you think about it, you may not put them in perspective, but I just wanted to pick out a few. One of the first ones he talks about, and this one is a sort of a pet peeve of mine, maybe it is of you, punctuality. We've become into this, the saying better late than never. Well, Zell Miller points out that in Marine Corps, it's better never than late. He turned it around. And nowadays, it is amazing that punctuality is one of those times and one of those things that people just ignore. That time is sort of irrelevant. It's just, well, I'll get there when I get there. It doesn't matter. I remember in Congress, it used to drive me nuts when we would have a hearing scheduled for 10 o'clock. And I would be sitting there ready to go 5 minutes before. Again, I have a little bit of military in me. I've been in the Air Force for 20-something years. And you understand, early is on time. Late is on time. And I think this is something, maybe for the younger audience today, you may be curling your eyes, you may be rolling back and saying, oh, Doug, you're just 50-something years old. You don't understand. Time is relevant. We'll get it. No, it's not. It actually means something. And I think it's interesting that Zell Miller would put punctuality into the discussion of core values. Why? Because he makes a point that says, if you're late, if you don't turn things in on time, if you don't meet deadlines, if you don't show up, if you have an appointment at 10 o'clock and you don't show up at 10 o'clock, you show up at 5 after, 10 after with every excuse in the world. Here's what it says. And it's so true. He said, if you don't make the time and think enough of being on time for what your appointments and your commitments are, then it tells how much you don't value the other person's time. Now, before any of you start trying to make excuses like, well, what about if you run over in your appointment? What if you had a wreck? Look, there are going to be times in which this happens. There are going to be times that you will be late, but it should not be the norm. I have a friend of mine who once, it was so true, I'd heard this story, and it is the pastor told the congregant that they said that after a meeting had started, they got there, this person got there late again. And the pastor looked at him and said, called them by name and said, look, I just want you to realize that if I'm still alive and you're still, your family wants me to perform your funeral, we're not going to start it till 10 minutes late. And the person looked at him and said, why? He said, because I wouldn't want anybody to think it wasn't anybody but you that was there that day. Now, that's a funny story to think about, that somebody was saying to you that you're always so late that you didn't want anybody to know it wasn't you if you're going to show up late to your own funeral. But what does it say that if you're always late? I mean, somebody once said you show up late to a job interview. You show up late to a job interview, what does that immediately say to an employer? It means that you don't value, number one, your own time, and you definitely don't value my time. Why should I value you enough to give you a job? First core value that's talking about is, punctuality, and he talks about it being an insult, to those that we are dealing with, and punctuality is something that we have to take seriously. The second thing is, and this comes again from his background. You have to understand this, not only his Marine Corps background, but also his background with his mother, his single mother who raised him. His dad died shortly after his birth, and he never knew his dad. He knew his mom, and his mom raised him, but he never knew his dad in this time. So for this next one, his mom always used to tell the story of the little engine that could. It was that persistence that you can always make it through. And in her life, she always, fighting poverty, fighting ways to feed her family, making a living in Young Harris, Georgia. Persistence became the issue. And he points this out is another core value that I want to bring out this morning, the core value of consistency. The core value of consistency coupled with persistence. How many times today do people just quit? It's the easy way to do it. I have watched it forever, and I've seen it grow more and more, that if something's just isn't working out, you quit. Whatever happened to persistency? Whatever happened to working out? Folks, hey, I'm going to tell you, Lincoln in his races, in electoral races, he ran 8 times. Abraham Lincoln, our president, 16th president of the United States, ran 8 times. He lost 5. What would have been if he said, well, I just can't win these races, I'm going to quit? Persistence matters. And so many times today in these areas of life that we need to focus on. We need to focus on the fact that when we are starting something, we don't quit. One of the things he learned in the Marine Corps, why he pointed out in this values is no matter how tough the situation is, you don't quit. You find that other gear, you find that other level, you believe it's bigger than yourself, and you keep going. And really, the issue here is how many times that we need to look at this persistency issue is that people often fail. In fact, we've talked about this in other leadership exercises. Failure is something normal. If you're not doing something, you'll never fail. If you're doing something, then you have the possibility of failing. And when that happens, then you fail, you learn, and you keep going, but you don't quit. This is, of all of the core values we're going to talk about today, this probably for me is one that hits hardest, but also is one that I think can affect more people in the sense that you don't quit. The standard today is that if you don't like it, just quit. One of the issues that he talks about in his life is that if you start something, you finish it. And I think that persistence is going to get you there. Persistence is going to set you apart from other people in life. Now, if you're doing something and you keep hitting the same wall over and over and over again, and you're not making changes to get the accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish, then that's more foolishness on your part. But giving up because you're not willing to try different ideas and try different plans is something that falls back on yourself as well. Persistence is something means that you stick with it, you keep doing it, you grow into it, and you make sure that you're not the one quitting, that you've given it all. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out, then you can simply sit back and say, I gave everything I could to make this happen. Persistence is the key to many things in life. And many of you who may be listening to this podcast right now, maybe you're thinking about quitting your job. You're thinking about quitting something that you started. You may be having a commitment to coach a team or play on a team, and you're thinking about quitting. Don't quit your commitments. Maybe some of you are actually thinking about quitting on a marriage. You're quitting on a relationship. Look, commitments matter. And sometimes the marriage is in, sometimes those relationships falter. But the question is it going to be because you quit trying, or is it going to be because that you've tried everything and it just didn't work? Look, persistence pays off. Roosevelt was rejected to go fight in the Spanish-American War. So what he did, he went out and made his own, basically made his own way into the Army and became one of the things that made him the larger-than-life hero. Number 2, John Grisham, the writer of all those, legal books, A Time to Kill and all these other John Grisham books that you can remember. It became a very famous author. He was rejected multiple times in the writing and manuscripts that he sent into publishers. They didn't think that they wanted to publish it. They didn't think it was good enough. If he had quit, we would have been devoid of some of the best literature out there when it comes to these crime and legal thrillers. These are the kind of things that when you continue in them, you persevere. When you continue and make progress, you do things. So 2 things that he points out. Number 1 is punctuality. Be on time, make your commitments, and make sure not just being on time, but make sure you're valuing the other person's time too. Because if you can waste your time, but if you're wasting somebody else's time, you're not valuing their time. And that's a respect mode that we'll talk about in a minute. Number 2 is having persistence about you in life. Get out there, do it, stick with it. Don't quit at the first obstacle. In fact, the first obstacle may be just simply saying from a perspective is, will you have enough determination to get over the obstacle so that you can see the results of persistence? The next thing he brought up in core values was respect. And now he discusses a great deal of respect when it comes to country and those who don't respect our country, those who stand against our country. And, he raises everything from athletes to flags to burning to everything else. But I think this is respect, more than anything else, breaks down into what he's saying is, what's in it for me? That has become the pervasive saying of what's in it for me. And where respect is something that is given. And it means that other people matter, that other ideas matter. And this has become one in a perspective of respect means thinking of the other person. It doesn't mean that you don't want to win. It doesn't mean that you want to make your point. It doesn't mean that you're not going to step back and say, this is exactly, what I'm going to work hard to get. But respect means that you respect others in your life, that you respect their opinions, you listen to them. How many times today do I hear people in conversations, or I see people that I talk to, and I've been guilty of it at a time, but I try to quickly correct myself, that you're in a conversation with somebody and you're looking down at your cell phone. You're looking down maybe at your computer screen. You're following off somewhere else. You're not giving the respect that other person deserves. One of the reasons that I think people struggle in relationships today is they don't have respect in the relationship for the other person, that they do everything else and they don't listen. Respect means being present and giving the other person full attention. Respect means saying that I don't agree with you, and here's why I don't agree with you, but I respect the right that you have the ability to form a position that I believe is wrong. That is respect. In our political circles today, we don't give respect. I disagree with Democrats on most every political issue that's available right now. But also there's a respect to say that they have the right under our Constitution and freedom of speech to make those points. It is up to me to then make the points back. And that is the term of respect. Respect was brought up for Zell Miller in his book, Core Values, understanding the chain of command, understanding those around you, giving respect to everyone you meet. How many times do we blow people off that we don't think are on the same level as us? Respect is about treating people with dignity and honor, no matter what they look like or where they come from. It reminds me of the old story of the guy who walked into the car dealership. He was in I love it how Zell Miller described those bib overalls. He had a dirty old truck, beat up truck out front that he drove into the dealership with. He walked in and wanted to talk to somebody. Nobody really paid him any attention. Finally, one of the salespeople come over and says, "Sir, what can I help you with?" And he said, "Well, I'm looking at buying some trucks." He said, "I need somebody to help me with." He said, "Well, I just don't know if we got anything that you can afford, and but I'll show you one." And he just sort of blew him off, and finally came back. And the guy said, "I'm looking to buy some trucks." He said, "Can you give me a price?" And the salesman went into the back, came back with a price. It was just a sticker price, and actually he didn't want to deal with it because when he looked at him, he didn't think there was anything the guy had to offer. It's a true story. Here in Gainesville, Georgia, where I'm from, the guy in the overalls got back in his old beat up truck, went down the road to another dealership, made a deal, and then he drove 6 brand new vehicles back to the other dealership and went and found the salesman and said, "Look, I just wanted to let you know this is what you forfeited. If you'd have just tried to help, I was trying to buy a vehicle from you. But you thought because I was dressed shabbily and my truck didn't look good that I couldn't afford it." The reality was this man was one of the richer people in the county, and this salesman made a bad mistake. Why? Because he didn't respect people. Folks, if you want to respect people, the way you do it is you honor them and you value them. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to affirm disagreements in their life, but you can respect them by listening. And then maybe if you disagree, state your ideas. That's what should come down to. But respect also goes to another core value that Zell Miller talks about, and that's responsibility. Take responsibility. I'm not going to beat this one to death. We talk about this a lot, but Marines were taught responsibility not only to self, but to others. Responsibility goes beyond yourself. Responsibility is someone that is the very apt and attitude of, I have what I can do, and then I will also make sure that I have a responsibility to others. Because if I'm taking care of my stuff, then I have a responsibility to others. This is something that we tend to think everybody's on their own, that the team concept is gone. Folks, team concepts are not gone. Everybody needs somebody. You always need people in your life that can help you up, build you up in areas maybe that you're weaker in, where you can help them where they're weaker. And it becomes a mentality that we're all in this together. When we believe that we have no responsibility to somebody else, or responsibility to our country, or responsibility to our communities, then we are the lesser for it, and our community is the lesser for it. Responsibility matters. Responsibility is something that actually works. And when responsibility works and responsibility matters, then we have a better society for it. And we've got to see this in our families. We need to see it in our jobs. We need to see it in our politicians. We need to see it in our press. We need to see it in our the entertainment industry. It is responsibility for actions. And it's not just, owning up to it. That's something we're missing today. If you mess up and you do it wrong, the first thing you need to do is accept responsibility for it. It's nobody else's responsibility but your own. Choices matter. Zell Miller understood this. He understood it from his days as a Marine. He understood it from his days as a lieutenant governor, and the senator from the state of Georgia. He understood it as a parent. He understood it as a husband. The responsibility matters. That you got to take responsibility, and you earn responsibility as you grow by how you handle it with others. So when we look at these areas of responsibility and we understand the areas of respect, they're hand in hand. Respecting others and taking responsibilities for your action, taking responsibility for your team, making sure that if you're working on a team, instead of making sure that the boss knows that it was somebody else who didn't do the job, how about going over and helping that person so that the team benefits from it and your community benefits from it? That's responsibility. Responsibility is taking responsibility for your own actions. And that is one of the core values Zell Miller talks about. The last core value that Zell speaks of is one that comes from basically his own background in the Marines, and it's Semper Fidelis, or always faithful. And I think this is the part that needs the most, at least look, and loyalty is staying true to that cause. Being faithful. Medal of Honor winners often are discussed this when they're asked why did they do what they do. They said it was I didn't want to let my buddies down. That you're loyal to those around you. Now, this is becoming a lesser and lesser, undoubtedly desired quality. Loyalty, though, is interesting that few people are loyal, but everybody wants loyalty. Well, the way that you understand this is loyalty is something that comes from you within. It comes from who you are. It comes from what you believe, and it comes from staying true to those around you. And when you take responsibility, when you have respect for other people, when you do these core values that Miller sort of laid out, and there's a lot that we're not going to discuss today, it comes down to loyalty. And are you loyal? I have stood by people who stood by me. I've stood by some people who didn't stand by me. I've stood by them because loyalty matters. If you tell somebody that you're going to do something, if you stand somebody that you're going to help them, if you tell somebody you're going to do something, loyalty to the job and loyalty to that relationship matters. You got to stick with your wingman. From an Air Force analogy, you stick with your wingman. You don't leave your wingman. You don't leave your family. You don't leave your friends. You don't leave those who've been with you just for a better opportunity or a more attractive position. You may leave. You may not be as close to them as you once were, but you don't leave the loyalty. Loyalty means that you're going to stick with your wingman even when they go through tough times. Because, folks, what really matters is those who are with you when things are going bad. Everybody will be with you when things are going good. The question is when you're struggling or you're trying to make a big decision, who are those people in your life that are loyal enough to look you in the eye and say, look, you're doing this right or you're doing this wrong. No matter what, I'm going to be here to help you through it. That's a core value that we can never not talk about. So as you look at this today, I hope these are just some values of help from an old mountain man, as he got to call himself, Zell Miller, who did some pretty phenomenal things, becoming lieutenant governor, one of the longest serving lieutenant governors in the country. He was also the governor of the state of Georgia, two-term governor, put in a Hope Scholarship program, brought scholarships and college opportunities to thousands of Georgians through that process, gave preschool education to those 4-year-olds coming up in our state. He then went on to the United States Senate. He stood before a Republican National Committee as a Democrat endorsing a Republican. And where did he get that? From Core Values. He got that from standing firm for what he believed in a book called Core Values, Everything You Need to Know I Learned in the Marines. I picked out a few things. Maybe they'll be helpful for you today as you go about your core values and developing them so that you can be the best person that you can be. It's Doug Collins. We'll see you on the next one. Hey everybody, I just want to talk about sleep. You know why I want to talk about sleep? It's because I just got out from underneath my MyPillow bed sheets and my pillow that I keep under my head every night, because I like to sleep on my side. I like to sleep on my back. I like to sleep, you know, I move at night, and MyPillow is just the best thing that goes under my head. It keeps me getting restful sleep. The sheets are amazing. It's just what you need. Everybody understands you need 7 hours of sleep. Why not sleep in some of the best products out there? And Mike and the folks at MyPillow are great folks to do this with. And you can go to mypillow.com, or you can call them at 800-564-8475. Use code word Collins, C-O-L-L-I-N-S. You won't want to miss this. If you have not got these Giza bed sheets, you need them. They're amazing. They're soft. They don't wear out. You need those to get that sleep against your body at night and provide that cooling, just soothing nature that lets you get the most sleep. But you know, they're not just about bed sheets and pillows. They also have the My Slippers. Amazing. I don't wear, I've talked to you about it before, I don't wear slippers, but I do wear My Slippers. They're amazingly comfortable. You can wear them outside. You can wear them inside. Great products. You've got towels. You've got all kinds of stuff. Go to mypillow.com. It's spring cleaning time. It's springtime to get out there and try and buy new things. Replace some of your old stuff. You'll want to replace your towels. Get some other products for your bedroom. All at mypillow.com. mypillow.com, or call 800-564-8475. Use the promo code Collins, C-O-L-L-I-N-S, when you check out. I guarantee you will be satisfied.